So we're joined today by Marekege, CTO and co-founder of Celo. Happy to have you here with us in Seoul. The jet lag has mostly worn off by now.
Thank you. No, it's really good to be here, and the coffee is really helping, and it's really great. It's good to be here.
Glad to hear it. So I guess we'll start with some kind of introductory questions. So you have a background in the Web2 industry with experience working at Microsoft, Google, GoDaddy, among others. So what motivated your shift to Web3?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So I have a background in computer science. I studied computer engineering first at the University of Toronto and then went to MIT for my PhD. And it was at MIT that I was studying deterministic multi-threading that just very coincidentally is very relevant towards scaling blockchains today. So even before some of my Web2 experience, I had some of that experience in distributed systems and parallel systems in this deterministic multi-threading field that ended up being quite, I think, relevant for Web3. But it is true that along the way, I had started a company called Loku, which was a Web2 company. It was a machine learning company that got acquired a few years later. And I had started that with René, who's one of my co-founders for Celo today. And after that experience, René and I teamed up again in 2017, and we talked about what we wanted to do next. We wanted to be very intentional, so we spent actually half a year creating a list of 100 different ideas, really digging into all the possible types of companies we could start. And not surprisingly, top of the list was the Celo idea, and as we were narrowing down this list, it just became more and more obvious that Web3 was just this absolutely exciting field. The impact that it could have on the world was just absolutely massive, and we knew really then and there that this would be what we would devote the rest of our careers to.
So I guess speaking of that early starting point, I guess aside from things kind of coinciding with your other co-founders, made 2017 to 18 the ideal time to launch C Labs and eventually Celo.
Yeah, and I think in large part it was just a nice continuation of our last company, and we were teaming up again. If you think back to 2017, there were no stable coins on Ethereum, very, very few dApps still. It was still very much the early days. The origin story for Celo is that we tried to build a wallet on top of Ethereum back then. We wanted to build a wallet that was really easy for everyone in the world to use, to be able to send value to any phone number in the world. And we couldn't really build it on top of Ethereum back then. We tried, and the experience just wasn't easy enough for everyone to use. And so that ultimately took us down the path of thinking about, okay, what are the primitives that you need to build in order to enable these kinds of applications, and what are the platform features that are needed? So in a way, we didn't set off to start to build a layer one back then, but in a way, the journey took us down that path, and ultimately that's what we felt we needed to do to be able to push the space forward.
I knew that Valora and Celo had a similar starting point, but I didn't actually realize the whole origin story that Valora in some ways kind of came first.
Yeah, and what was really nice about starting with the wallet is that we could build the wallet and the layer one at the same time, much the same way that Apple does the software and hardware at the same time. And in so doing, we were able to inform what was needed at each layer of the stack and ultimately build something that had a tighter connection, tighter coupling, and that could deliver a better user experience. And Apple, very successfully does this today with software and hardware, and I think the same can be true in the Web3 stack as well.
I feel like one of the kind of first things that you hear about Celo is the mobile-first design, which really defines the protocol and I think really changes the game. But I was just curious about whether there were any challenges you faced because of this approach, or any considerations that you have to keep in mind.
Definitely, lots of challenges. It was a lot of work. I think we certainly underestimated the difficulty in creating a light client that can work on low-power, resource-constrained devices. That took actually, almost 3 years to fully develop, and that's because we ended up needing to do it using ZK snarks, which are pretty cutting-edge cryptography primitives that very few people, especially back then, had the expertise to. The tooling wasn't where it is today, and even then we ended up having to really kind of innovate and push the boundary in creating a circuit that it was actually even to this day, one of the biggest out there that's used in production. The other thing that we did, this protocol called SocialConnect, which allows you to effectively send money to phone numbers instead of public key-derived addresses. And the first instantiation of that was fully decentralized. It was really cool. You would be paired with 3 randomly selected validators, and they would send you these text messages. On Android, you could read them automatically, and so it didn't matter that you were receiving multiple, but on an iPhone, it was a bit cumbersome. People had to copy-paste 3 codes. And I think we learned along the way that maybe we pushed things a little too far on the decentralization side. Maybe it didn't matter so much that verification mechanism was fully decentralized. What mattered more was interoperability between wallets. And so that took us down the path of evolving this to something that we call now SocialConnect, which is just a way for effectively wallets to verify phone numbers on behalf of their customers using a single text message, just like you're used to on a centralized service, but then do so in a way where that mapping is still accessible to the whole ecosystem, to all the wallets, to all the dApps. So you get the benefit of interoperability. Those iPhone users don't have to copy-paste 3 codes, they can just use one, and it makes things a lot easier. So I think those were some of the challenges. I think there were many learnings along the way, but I think ultimately we've created a platform and a whole bunch of ecosystem apps that really are just focused on mobile. And if you talk to folks who have dApps in this whole ecosystem, they'll frequently talk about just how much traffic that they receive is actually coming from mobile, significantly more than they see on other chains. And that to me makes me feel like all of that effort was worthwhile, that we kind of succeeded.
And actually, speaking of SocialConnect, I was curious to know what developers could start to build with SocialConnect.
Yeah, really great question. So first and foremost, letting wallets interoperate and be able to let their customers send value to phone numbers, even if the recipient is using another wallet, I think is the primary and most obvious use case. But SocialConnect supports not just phone numbers, but other social handles. And so extending that to other social handles is certainly of interest as well. If you think about amalgamation of everyone's contact lists on everyone's phone, that together create a social graph of sorts. It's a decentralized social graph, and it's one that's probably bigger than Facebook's social graph. And so if you're building anything that has any social element to it, SocialConnect is a nice way to kind of plug into that social graph. Just like WhatsApp plugged into these contact lists, SocialConnect lets dApps plug into the same effectively social graph to bootstrap whatever network effects they're trying to create. So one example of this is if you're creating like a savings protocol where you're inviting your friends to participate in your pool, you can use their names if they exist in your contact list to find them and to invite them into your dApp.
Okay, kind of jumping to another slightly different question, but I guess historically blockchain has often been associated with excessive energy consumption, lack of concern for ESG policies, and sustainability generally. Celo's growth and the rise of ReFi, also the merge, the launch of the ECF, the Ethereum climate platform, also recent leaps in AI and how that might work together with blockchain. I was just wondering if you had something to say about these trends or what other industry trends are helping to kind of shift that perspective.
Yeah, we're super excited about these trends and really humbled that some of this is now happening on the Celo ecosystem. Increasingly, people are calling Celo the home of ReFi, and that's likely in large part because Celo was the first chain to offset its carbon. 3 years ago, when the network launched, there was an on-chain governance proposal that proposed that the protocol programmatically buy carbon offset credits using emissions. The proposal passed. It was very widely supported, and since then, the chain has been buying carbon offset credits automatically. Back then we wanted to put a stake in the ground, and this was before the merge. This was, think about it, both Ethereum and Bitcoin were proof of work networks back then. The narrative was crypto is terrible for the environment, and we wanted to start helping shift that narrative and really show the world just how impactful crypto can be for climate. And we're pretty thrilled that a lot of chains have followed suit. We're even more excited by the fact that the community of ReFi builders has kind of emerged, and they're doing just incredibly really amazing things now on Celo.
Yeah, I was kind of amazed because when I started working in this industry maybe 2 years ago, looking up blockchain technology and the environment on Google, just you had the same kind of result 2 years ago. And now there's so many just papers and just like content coming out about all of the ways in which you can really use blockchain technology for like greener initiatives, and I think seeing that change was actually really exciting. So I guess on the topic of ReFi, what do you think are some of the kind of greater obstacles that are standing in the way of mainstream adoption, or more protocols or more of the industry kind of taking part in or going in that direction? And what steps do you think other players need to start taking to drive more meaningful?
I would say maybe two things. One common theme in ReFi has been tokenizing carbon offset credits. There's a lot of value to be had by doing so. I think there's a lot of demand for carbon offset credits, both in the voluntary and non-voluntary markets throughout the world. There's a lot of companies that have made commitments by 2030 that they will be carbon neutral by then, and carbon offset credits are going to play a big role in that. But historically, carbon offset credits haven't had the best reputation because sometimes they don't represent ultimately what's being stated about them. Sometimes they're double spent or double retired, and there's not much transparency in their price. They're traded OTC all the time, and it's very difficult to know exactly how much they're worth. Now, the double spending and the price discovery, those are things that crypto can help with a lot. Literally, the problem maps so perfectly to crypto that it's just so obvious that these things should be traded on-chain. But even on the reputation front, I think there's a lot of work that can be done to use verifiable compute to effectively show on-chain and prove on-chain that these things are doing what they claim they're doing. There's a project that's creating credits by plugging oil wells in the US called Carbon Path, and they're putting sensors around these oil wells that are reporting on the methane leak levels around those sites, and they can show that by plugging this oil well, they've eliminated those methane leaks, and that the leaks continue to be absent to this day. If you bring that data on-chain, people can verify that really easily as they're trading these assets that are derived from that work. And so this is a really exciting field, but to really make this, I think, take off, certainly a whole bunch of standardization around measuring of this type of data needs to happen. And then I think better exchanges that allow corporates to buy these assets on-chain need to be brought up, and there's a lot of people working on both of these problems, and I think that's going to have a big impact. That's on the carbon offset credit side, which is, in my mind, just a small piece of ReFi. For the rest of ReFi, I think the biggest bottleneck is honestly Web3 builders coming up with new and exciting protocols that can do things that previously we didn't think were possible. Protocols that are backing money by trees or incentivizing really massive tree planting projects. I think these are the things that are possible today, but we need to build more and more exciting protocols to make that happen.
So this year, Celo won at the CMX Community Industry Awards the Web3 Community of the Year and Community of the Year Awards. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So how is it to receive this recognition, and what do you think sets Celo's community apart?
Obviously it's very humbling, not just for me, but for the whole community. Last year we also received a social impact award from the Crypties as well, which kind of like the Academy Awards of crypto. I was there personally to collect that reward, and yeah, it was a great honor, especially to do so on behalf of the community. And I think this is definitely something unique about the Celo ecosystem and the Celo community. If you look across the broader Web3 landscape, there's a lot of excitement for Web3 and for certain kind of new projects that people are building. But one of the things that the Celo community and ecosystem has that is really perhaps unique is just a lot of heart, a lot of soul, and a lot of focus on solving things that are difficult, are big, ambitious problems that Web3 is actually now making possible for us to address. That to me is very energizing. I think when I wake up every morning, I get to work with these amazing people. I think it just makes it a really special place.
Yeah, I think from when I was first learning about Celo 2 years ago, it definitely stood out to me because of this very kind of human approach, I think. So it's really exciting to see kind of how far it's come and how many new kind of projects are popping up all the time. So at the start of the year, Celo underwent its rebranding to Celo 2.0, which was complete with a technical roadmap that includes goals that range from deeper alignment with the Ethereum roadmap and horizontal scalability to redefining Celo's tokenomics. Where is Celo at today?
Yeah, so we made a lot of progress. I think on the tokenomic front, we announced Ultra Green Money on Earth Day 2023, which is really Celo's version of ultrasound money, which is a way to make Celo both a deflationary currency, but also one where, in addition to the carbon offset credits that the protocol is buying today, 20% of every transaction fee will be used to buy carbon offset credits programmatically and then retire them on-chain as well. And so all that work is now code complete. It's been announced, it's on a testnet, it's waiting for the next hard fork to be deployed to mainnet. On the Ethereum alignment front, we've been doing a lot of work to make it possible for people to pay for gas with ETH on Celo. Celo is unique in that you can pay for gas with tokens, and so we're adding support for paying for gas with bridged WET on Celo. And we're also working to add support to MetaMask using a MetaMask Flask to be able to let folks actually pay for gas in MetaMask as well using WET. And actually, I was super excited to see, literally right before this interview, that Well Done has added support for paying for gas with tokens on Celo. And so as soon as WET supports this, Well Done will also be able to pay for gas with ETH. So that's really, really cool. On the Ethereum alignment front, the other thing that we've been working really hard on is a trustless bridge to Ethereum. So Celo has a ZK Snark-based light client called Plumo, and we're working really hard to make that light client be verifiable cheaply on Ethereum, and that will allow the Celo ecosystem to both bridge assets more in a trustless manner between the two chains, but also will set us up for further additional integrations with Ethereum, which we're really excited about. We're also continuing to do a lot of work on scalability. The current chain can support 1,000 transactions per second in test environments. There is a smaller, more conservative block size limit in production today, but in theory we could raise it up to 1,000 transactions per second as demand grows, and we're continuing to push that further and further in the future, primarily by splitting up the Celo codebase so that you have execution and consensus as two different clients, similar to what Ethereum did. And so there's a lot of work being done to make that possible right now. But that's been going really well. And then on the horizontal scalability front, there's now increasingly a whole bunch of projects that are building and launching their scaling solutions on Celo. Blockless is probably the best example of this. They're creating a ZK WASM-based system where you can write your code in WASM and then prove it and have it be verified on Celo very cheaply. So you can compress a lot of computation into a very small ZK proof. So lots of work happening. Even though it's a bear market, everyone's building.
Like most of the building gets done in bear markets. So
Absolutely.
I think hearing about Ultra Green Money recently was kind of crazy. I mean, I think it's just like such an incredible concept, I think, and also just like there's just some kind of like even further in this direction more than I was expecting. I didn't realize, I was kind of curious what the bat and the tree was after the presentation. I was like, that's what it meant.
For context, the bat means ultrasound and the tree means green, and so that's where the ultra green meme on Twitter that you may have seen with the bat and the tree comes from. It's inspired, of course, by ultrasound money from Ethereum.
So this is my last question. So at Celo's core is prosperity and the vision, and also just at the core of the ecosystem and the protocol. So what does prosperity mean to Celo, and I guess on a more personal level, what does it mean to you?
So Celo's mission is one about creating a new financial system that creates the conditions for prosperity for all. And this means something different to everyone. For me, it's always been around financial security. I think we live in a world where a lot of people are excluded from today's financial infrastructure. A lot of people without even government recognized IDs, and so they're not even eligible to open bank accounts. And self-custody is just an amazing mechanism that in most legal jurisdictions allows folks without government recognized IDs to access financial tools. And so we're really motivated as an ecosystem about enabling that. Everyone has their own kind of definition, but for me it's really one about financial inclusion.
So yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This was really great. These were some really great questions.
So for people who want to learn more about Celo or who wish to get in contact, where can they find you and how can they reach you?
Yeah, certainly Celo.org is a really great resource. We're also on Twitter at the @Celo.org handle. And then if you want to reach out to me, Twitter is also probably best at @MAREK_. So my first name and then an underscore. And DMs tend to be open, so feel free to reach out there.
Great, thank you, Marek.
Yeah, thank you for having me.